Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with Phil Putney and myself. And we're trying out some new software this week. So we're going to have we'll see how this goes. Yeah. The colors are really nice, and it's definitely interesting. So instead of the normal company that starts with a Z that everybody uses, we're trying a different one here. So we'll see how this goes. But we're going to talk about Social Security myths. Actually, we're going to break this into two podcasts this week and next week. We're going to go through the top 10 Social Security myths and run them down a little bit with Phil. So we'll just dive in and get rolling. Phil, how's it going, buddy?
Doing good.
Yeah.
We're getting into spring. I'm loving it.
That's right.
So
that's right.
It's going to warm up this week.
Was your Easter good?
It was really good. Thank you. Yeah. Beautiful weather. One of the nicest weathers from Easter. So great time to get outside with the kids. We Easter egg hunts and all that fun stuff. So
right. Yeah, you never know what the weather's going to give you. So.
Yeah, we've had snow some Easters all the way to this year. This year it was almost 70. So sunny, beautiful.
Can't beat it.
Can't complain. Not in Michigan.
Right. Well, it is what it is. But one thing we can complain about, and often, is Social Security.
There you go. Yeah.
And certainly one of the complaints is, I think a lot of these myths that I've got here, Phil, you can there's always a nugget, I think, that helps kind of spawn the larger incorrectness of the myth, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. So let's break them down a little bit and take a look at them, see what we got going on here. Let's just jump in and get started. Myth number one, the Social Security Administration will help you to make the best decision about when you should start your benefits. And this is, I think, certainly a misnomer. They help you with a lot of things, but they don't know your financial situation.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, according to their manual, they're not allowed to give you "quote unquote" advice. Which, I mean, that's the reality of what that is that's advice. When should I file?
Right.
I mean, if you want to know, what would my benefit be doing this or that, or filing at this age, or spousal, all the facts, they can give you all that.
Right.
But as far as figuring out what is the right strategy, what's the best decision for me with Social Security, they can't do that. I mean, it's just they're not allowed to. Because they don't, it makes sense, right? They don't know your entire scenario.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it'd be like asking your lawyer to help you tune your car.
That's right. They don't know the whole thing. So you can't.
Might be a good mechanic maybe on the side, but it's not really what you're seeing him for.
Yeah, and I mean one of the frustrations I hear a lot with Social Security, and I mean this is pretty typical with any agency like that, is it depends on who you talk to. What answer you get, unfortunately. So my recommendation is if you're calling in, if it's a little bit more complex question, first talk to your advisor. They should understand all the ins and outs and the basics of Social Security, probably answer 90% or more of questions you would have. But if you've got a more complex scenario on your scenario, your situation specifically, call in, talk to the first line person, see what you hear. If you don't like what you hear, just ask for a supervisor, because usually it's the next level up, like many organizations, right? They're a little bit more knowledgeable. They better understand how things work, and the realities of the benefits. So
and I imagine they're pretty swamped too. These folks.
All the time. Yeah.
So,
and it's and it's getting a little bit, at least in our area, a little bit easier to go into the office if you actually like that. Going to the physical office. But it's still online or not online, but making a phone call is probably the easiest way to get the answer.
Well, they do a great job, right? Again, but they're also swamped, and there's just so many things they can do, and so they can help you kind of look at some of the different, benefits that you're eligible for, but not necessarily the best strategy, right? So
correct. Yeah, they're not going to give you a strategy.
Yeah.
So, or I should say they shouldn't give you a strategy. They're not supposed to give you a strategy. So if one of them starts to try to give you a strategy, just be cautious. Again,
That's true.
Understand where they should be and what they should be doing. It's all about the facts with them. If this is what the benefit is at this point or that point or how whatever you're looking for that answer on specifically. So
okay, all right, let's go to myth number two, and that is you don't get any Social Security if you're a stay-at-home mom. And this one, I can see where this one gets kind of perverted a little bit, right? Because it's like there's a couple of requirements, right, Phil, you have to hit for your own individual benefit.
Correct. Yeah, and that's really the key is that you would not have an individual benefit if you're Potentially, if you were a
If you've
stay-at-home
never had a
mom.
job.
Right. So if you've never had a job, yeah, you wouldn't qualify. You have to have 40 quarters, basically 10 years of earning history to even qualify for benefits on your own record.
Right.
So this was something not part of the original Social Security Act back when it was started by FDR with the New Deal. It was brought about after to help for just this scenario, the stay-at-home mom, or spouse that didn't work.
Sure.
But yeah, so you're not eligible for benefits on your own, but you could be eligible for what's called a spousal benefit.
Right.
Which is going to be 50% of the other earning spouse, their benefit at full retirement.
Yeah.
And that's often the misunderstanding and kind of the myth and, that relating to that spousal benefit is that it's half of the benefit at full retirement is what's you're eligible for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And so I think that's where the confusion comes in, because it's like, well, if you had a job on your own, then you would be eligible for your own up to those minimums. You got to have those minimums.
Right.
But if you never did and you were married, then yes, you would still be eligible. So. And
this is where a lot of planning comes into play too, though, because just throw some quick numbers out there. Let's say your spouse's full benefit was $3,000. Make it easy math. So technically, spousal benefits are $1,500 at full retirement. But how spousal benefits work is that you subtract from that spousal benefit your own benefit. So if you did have a work history and had a small benefit, call it $500 even, if you're eligible for spousal benefits of $1,500, you're going to get the same $1,500 whether you had a work history or not.
It's the higher of the two.
It's the higher of the two.
It's the same as when a spouse passes away, it's the higher of the two.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's often I've had discussions with clients about, well, I've got my spouse doesn't have a work history, so should she or he go back to work and get some, build up that earning history to build up the benefit?
Right.
The reality is building it up to the point of that spousal benefit really doesn't matter. You're going to get the same benefit either way. So it doesn't help you. It doesn't hurt you.
Right.
But there is no real advantage total, from a total benefit standpoint. But that being said, there still could be some strategies and why and when and how that works, because you can file for your own benefit at a different time from spousal.
Yeah.
So if you do have it, there's a lot of complexities and, twists and turns you can take on the whole Social Security path.
And there's some interesting caveats if you're married more than once. Like my mom wound up getting her Social Security changed in her 80s from her first husband. Yeah. Because she's not married now. She had been married, in the past. She'd had more than one husband.
Right.
But they were, again, back to the first question, the person on the line helped her, to say, well, you're eligible for your first husband's benefit, which because you were married at least 10 years. Right. And you haven't been married. You're not currently married.
You're not currently married. Right. Yep.
Yeah,
yep. So you could go back and get a survivor benefit off from, if you've had more than one husband that has passed away,
or wife,
you've met the 10 years, or wife, right? Same. Yeah. So
little interesting caveats in there.
There's a lot of twists and turns and benefits in Social Security planning to really understand how are you getting the best benefit out of it. So
absolutely. Okay, myth number 3: you won't pay taxes on your Social Security since you paid taxes on that money already.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice, right?
This is a fun one. Now, once upon a time, Phil, this was true.
Yes. Yeah. So again, I mentioned FDR's New Deal. I mean, that's when Social Security was instituted. And that was actually part of his New Deal, the Social Security Act, was not taxable. The benefit itself was not taxable. But as soon as he was out of office, the next administration came in, they figured out how to tax it. And since then, it's been taxed.
Right.
But
this is where income planning comes into play, though, right? Because
it's huge.
Depending on where you're pulling and how you're pulling in your income, it's going to affect how much up to Social Security could be taxed.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a whole process you go through to first figure out number one, your provisional income. Which easiest way to think of it, a provisional income is everything on the front page of the return plus half of the Social Security benefit. So all the taxable income you have, half of Social Security benefit and municipal bond interest, any tax exempt interest. That's your provisional income. And then you compare that to, and we'll have on the screen a slide that talks about the thresholds for single and married filing joint. But for married filing joint, for instance, once that provisional income number gets above $32,000, 50% of the benefit starts to become taxable. Once it gets above 44, 85% of the benefit becomes taxable. That's the amount taxable. That's not the tax rate.
Right.
Often people think, well, take
not
an 85% tax.
No.
I was joking and said, yeah, they're greedy, but they're not that greedy. Okay. They're
Yeah.
not going to, it's not an 85% tax,
Right.
but at 85% of it's taxable at whatever your current rate is.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
okay.
But I mean, to your point, this is where income planning really comes into play, because the reality is once you're, for a married couple, let's say above that 44,000, which isn't a big number.
Right.
Interesting caveat with those numbers, they haven't been indexed since the 80s. So that's why they're as low as they are. It's one of the few things in the code that doesn't get indexed each year.
Well, that's good.
One of the few thresholds. So, I mean, it's unfortunately more and more people every year, just with inflation, get forced into these higher levels of taxation on Social Security.
Oh.
But with that, once you're above that top tier threshold, it becomes this tax trap of, I take another dollar out of my IRA or earn another dollar, of interest, dividends, whatever it is. Along with that, now into the tax equation comes another 85 cents of your Social Security benefit. So even if you're in the 12% bracket today, that extra dollar from whatever it is brought with it the 85 cents of Social Security. So you're paying tax on $1.85 at 12%, which is 20%.
Yeah.
So it's, it's one of those things. I thought it was in the 12% bracket. Well, you're in the marginal bracket of 12%, right. But because of taxation of Social Security, you're actually paying tax on $1.85. So you're not really paying 12%, it's 20.
Wow.
And it gets worse as you go up the brackets.
Sneaky.
So yeah, it's not you don't see that anywhere in the tax rate. It's just how the formula works.
Right.
But to your point, this is where huge amounts of advantages can be gained in income planning.
Yes. And
how do you structure that income need that you have from a tax efficiency standpoint?
And we talk about that all the time. So don't look at okay, I've got my pension, or I've got my 401k. Oh, and then I have Social Security. Talk with a professional about how these things work together.
Absolutely.
And how to put a strategy, cohesively together, because it can make a big difference. It's not this, and that. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, when we're looking at Social Security with clients, I mean, we always start with Social Security kind of by itself in a box, I say, just to get
you could do it like a standalone.
Get the concept to understand these are the advantages and pros and cons and how it works. And based on that, this might be the right strategy. But very often, by the time now we blend that in with their other income, the need they have, and the assets they have, it's a totally different strategy.
Yeah.
Because now to maximize everything and make it work more efficiently, it changes the picture on how Social Security should be brought into that equation. So.
Yeah, and running that Social Security maximization is helpful, and really and stress testing some different scenarios really kind of helpful in looking at what might be the best option, whether you're single, or married. So
and I mean, again, that's a great place to start. But my encouragement with that would be, don't use a Social Security maximization as the analysis to say this is when I'm going to file, because based on that, this is the right strategy.
Right. Yeah.
Make that decision in light of everything else.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Good points for sure. All right. So moving right along here on some top Social Security myths. So that's the first 3. We're going to do 2 more here this week, and then we'll do the other 5 next week. The next 2 are the biggies, the big myths that everybody hears and everybody gets all worked up about. And this is what the media and so on and so forth run with. There won't be any Social Security left by the time that you retire. I just don't think no one's going to totally eliminate it. I don't think anyone has the wherewithal to deal with that from a political standpoint. And let's be honest, it's a political poker chip. And it's a hot potato nobody wants.
Yeah, it's funny. I always joke around. I say Social Security is a hot potato, right? No one wants to touch it.
Right.
The reality is whoever touches it and changes what needs to be done to make it work long term is going to be blamed for the whole thing. So no one's touching it yet.
I don't think it's going anywhere, but changes have to happen.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the big myth, or, the fact that you're always hearing, and it's true, is that the trust fund, and that's the piece that often that gets left out, the trust fund, which is the surplus that's been built up since this started, because there's been way more workers paying in than collecting up until, the last 5 to 10 years. But now that trust fund is being spent down. So if they do absolutely nothing, don't change how it's calculated, and this number changes every year, but it's somewhere in the 2030s, 32, 33. It kind of changes as they run the math each year.
Right.
If that trust fund runs out, then it's around 75% of the benefit that it could pay based on the amount of Social Security benefits coming in.
Right.
And again, that's if they change nothing.
And it's interesting because you hear that, and yet we also, due to losses through COVID, there's a number out there around 220 billion supposedly that had been recouped from the fact that people that passed away from COVID or whatever, seniors or whatnot, they don't really necessarily talk about that going right back into it, right? Even though you go, well, wait a minute, you use that story when you need to. So again, it's kind of one of those things where, and we know that they take from the trust fund for all sorts of things, and then they put it back, and so on and so forth. So it's all creative.
I mean, that's really another misnomer, because the reality is the Social Security is invested in a specific type of government bond that was part of the Social Security Act. It was created with that in the beginning. So, I mean, it's not like they're borrowing from it and putting it. I mean, it's invested in a long-term government bond, a specific series of bond only available to Social Security. I mean, that's how it was originally designed.
Oh, interesting.
So everyone thinks about, they're always robbing the benefit. That's why it's in trouble. It's not. I mean, they borrow it, absolutely, but that's how it was designed.
I see. Okay. Another myth.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But just be very, very careful of the hype you hear on Social Security. There has to be some change.
It's got
absolutely.
Issues. Yeah,
it has a lot of issues, and if you wanted to stress test it, maybe say, what happens if I lose 25% of the benefit?
Good point.
I mean, that to me is mathematically what they're saying is the worst thing that could happen. Yeah. And that's how it was designed. I mean, this is another myth that people don't really understand the fact of Social Security. It was never designed as a private pension. The money that, you paid in and your employer paid in is in this account for you.
Right.
No, I mean, it was, the current worker has always funded those that are collecting the benefits.
Yeah,
the very first people that collected,
right?
Yeah, the very first people that collected Social Security, they had paid in pennies versus the dollars they got out. I mean, there's no way they were getting that benefit. It was all based on the workers paying in. So
we're going to have to look at changes, maybe some age changes, maybe some grandfathering things in. People over 50 probably aren't nearly as in jeopardy as moving parts as people under 50. So, but I think just the general, it's going broke, which leads to myth number 5. So therefore you should turn it on as soon as possible, right?
Right.
So that's the myth number 5. Well, I'm getting it while it's here to get. So as soon as I'm 62, I'm turning it on. And if you need the money, Phil, we talk about this to nth degree, fine, right?
Right.
But if you don't, it may not be the best. It's just don't turn it on just because you think it's going broke.
Yeah. Any financial decision you're making in retirement, know why you're making the decision. Don't make it on some, I heard, it's going broke, or I heard whatever it is, because unfortunately, those are going to be emotional decisions that at the end of it probably aren't going to be the right decision.
Yeah.
Understand the math behind it. Yeah. If you want to, hedge against what happens if Social Security has to cut it or whatever, then that's a whole nother scenario. But don't file early just because I think it's going to go broke, so I want to get the money before they change the rules on me. Even if they do change it, which, I mean, at some point they probably will. Mark, to your point, I personally think, somewhere in the 50s or beyond, or for sure into the 60s or beyond, I don't think those individuals are going to see a change in benefit.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to. There's enough they can do with the younger benefit, the younger worker, how their benefits calculated, everything else to make this all work.
Just look at France right now, right? I mean, they're how upset they are over pushing.
Oh, yeah, changing it for 2 years. Yeah.
So and it's the younger people that are upset about it because they don't want to have to work 2 years longer. And I get it, but that's probably the same situation we're looking at here. I mean, I've seen this, tons of things, Phil, where it's like if they just eliminate the early retirement age or even move it back from 62 to 64, they could talk about funding in another 50 or 100 years. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you think of that age ranges you can collect, 62 being the earliest all the way to 70, and then that full retirement age in the middle that they moved. I mean, if they simply moved that whole thing up, for the earliest wasn't 62, maybe it's even 65 or something of that range, moved out that full retirement, got rid of the delayed earning credit, or, narrowed that out or pushed that out to 75. I mean, there's so many things they could do if they change that, again, for a group of individuals under a certain age.
Right. Yeah.
Which typically in these kind of scenarios, that's what happens, right? They anytime they make a change, I mean, RMDs is a great example.
Exactly.
They just went through all the changes they made with RMDs. They're saying, okay, for those born on or after X date, this is the new rule.
Yep.
And if they change or when they change Social Security at some point, I envision at least that's what's going to happen is they're going to say, okay, if you're, born on or before X date, this is how the new system, how it works for you.
Yeah.
those born after that, and getting back then to filing early because, once I file, they can't change it on me. I don't think that's going to be a factor. I think it's going to be more, if you're in this age range, this is how it works.
This is how it works, yeah. I would agree. So that's the first 5 Social Security myths. We got 5 more we're going to do next week. So as always, make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so. Find us online at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, all that good stuff. So you can follow us there or hit subscribe for more content, as well as check out past content and all that good jazz. And of course, if you need Phil, you can just reach out to him through the website as well, or 248-888-7530. That's 248-888-7530. We're up against the clock here, Phil, so I'll let you go, and we'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts.
Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.